In the ancient land of Egypt, the descendants of Jacob, known as the Israelites, had become a significant and prosperous community. However, a new Pharaoh ascended to power who did not remember the contributions of Joseph, an Israelite who had once been a high-ranking official. Fearing the growing population of the Israelites, Pharaoh decreed that all newborn Hebrew boys were to be thrown into the Nile River to curb their numbers and prevent them from becoming a threat. Amidst this backdrop of oppression, a Levite woman named Jochebed gave birth to a son. Recognizing the extraordinary nature of her child, and driven by maternal love and divine inspiration, Jochebed was determined to save him from Pharaoh's cruel decision. For 3 months, Jochebed managed to keep her baby hidden. But as the child grew, it became increasingly difficult to conceal him. Jochebed crafted a plan. She wove a small basket out of bulrushes, sealing it with pitch and tar to make it watertight. Placing her precious son inside, she set the basket afloat among the reeds along the banks of the Nile River, praying that God would protect him. Jochebed's daughter, Miriam, watched from a distance to see what would become of her brother. Her heart raced with every ripple and movement on the water. It was then that the daughter of Pharaoh came to bathe in the river. She noticed the basket among the reeds and sent one of her maidservants to retrieve it. When she opened the basket, she saw the crying baby and felt compassion for him, recognizing him as one of the Hebrew children. As Pharaoh's daughter cradled the baby, Miriam approached her with courage and cunning. She offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child, and Pharaoh's daughter agreed. Miriam fetched Jochebed, who was then brought before Pharaoh's daughter, without revealing her true identity. Jochebed was entrusted with the care of her own son, whom she nursed and nurtured. When the child grew older, Jochebed brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own and named him Moses, meaning, drawn out of the water. Moses was raised in the splendor of the Egyptian court, receiving an education befitting a prince. Yet, he never forgot his true heritage, instilled in him by his mother during their early years together. While growing up in Pharaoh's palace, Moses had been exposed to Egyptian education, culture, and religion. This upbringing provided him with a unique position. Straddling 2 worlds, he was a Hebrew by birth but an Egyptian by nurture. This dual identity may have contributed to his strong sense of justice and empathy for the suffering of his people. As a young man, Moses was aware of his Hebrew heritage. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. In anger, Moses killed the Egyptian and buried his body in the sand. The next day, he saw 2 Hebrews fighting and tried to intervene, but one of them mocked him for killing the Egyptian. Realizing his act was known, Moses fled to Midian to escape Pharaoh's wrath. In Midian, Moses helped the daughters of Jethro, a Midianite priest, by driving away shepherds who were harassing them. In gratitude, Jethro invited Moses to stay with his family. Moses married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters, and became a shepherd. Years later, while tending Jethro's flock on Mount Horeb, Moses encountered a burning bush that was not consumed by the flames. God spoke to Moses from the bush, revealing his name as Yahweh and commanding Moses to return to Egypt to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Despite his initial reluctance and self-doubt, particularly regarding his speaking abilities, God reassured Moses and appointed his brother Aaron as his spokesman. Moses returned to Egypt and confronted Pharaoh, demanding the release of the Israelites. Pharaoh refused, leading to a series of 10 devastating plagues sent by God to force Pharaoh's hand. The plagues included turning the Nile to blood, infestations of frogs, lice, and flies, livestock disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn sons of Egypt. The Israelites were spared from the final plague by marking their doorposts with lamb's blood, a sign for the angel of death to pass over their homes. After the death of his own son, Pharaoh relented and let the Israelites go. However, he soon changed his mind and pursued them with his army trapped between Pharaoh's forces and the Red Sea. Moses stretched out his hand, and God parted the waters, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters returned and drowned all the army. The Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, facing challenges such as hunger and thirst. God provided manna from heaven and water from a rock to sustain them. Despite these miracles, the people often grumbled and lost faith. At Mount Sinai, God made a covenant with the Israelites, giving them the 10 Commandments and other laws to live by. Moses spent 40 days and nights on the mountain. During that time the Israelites thought he had died, and they made a golden calf to worship. In anger, Moses broke the tablets of the law, but later ascended the mountain again to receive new tablets. The Israelites' lack of faith continued as they reached the borders of Canaan, the promised land. Spies sent to scout the land reported it was good, but inhabited by giants. The people's fear led to their rebellion, and as a consequence, God decreed that the current generation would wander in the desert for 40 years until they all died out, except for Joshua and Caleb, the 2 faithful spies. During this time, Moses continued to lead, guiding the people, settling disputes, and interceding with God on their behalf. As the 40 years drew to a close, Moses prepared the new generation to enter Canaan. He delivered a series of speeches, recounted the law, and warned them to remain faithful to God. Moses appointed Joshua as his successor. God showed Moses the promised land from Mount Nebo, but told him he would not enter it. Moses died there at the age of 120. The Israelites mourned him for 30 days. Joshua then led them across the Jordan River into Canaan. In Christianity, Moses is seen as a prefiguration of Jesus Christ, particularly in his role as a lawgiver and mediator. The story of Moses is rich with theological, moral, and spiritual lessons. Through his life, we see the unfolding of God's plan for his people, and the establishment of a covenant relationship that would shape the course of history.